Okay, so we're getting quicker now as we get the hang of how all these pieces move. And the rooks, the second most powerful piece in chess, are next. Long-range pieces that move in straight lines, up, down, or across the board. The name, as far as I know, comes from an Arabic word for rook, which I believe means a siege tower, although I've been told that it might be a chariot as well. And that makes sense because of the way it moves. If you think about it, a moving castle sounds a bit odd, but a chariot might make sense, and a siege tower would be on wheels, so you could push it up towards a castle. Anyway, fine. So that makes sense as to why it's come to look a bit like a castle in the diagrams. So they begin the game in the corners, and they can move in any straight line until they are blocked. So if the board was set up in full at the start of the game, they'd obviously have no moves. So they tend not to get a lot of use until the middle and the end game. But they are very powerful indeed, and especially if you have them doubled up. And what doubled up means is the rook's on the same line. There's also a special rook move, which is part of castling, which we'll look at later on. And rooks really like open files. And what we mean by an open file is a file, a row of squares that has no pawn blocking it. So a nice open board is what the rook's like. And we usually say they're worth about 5 in chess, so they're better than the bishop and the knight. But 2 bishops together would probably be a bit stronger than a rook. A bishop and a knight, again, slightly stronger than the rook. So here's some examples of some moves. There's 2 rooks on a board. We'll start with the black rook. Now he can go to any of the squares labelled with an X. So you can see they make nice straight lines on the board, but of course he can't go to A6 or B6 because the pawn on C6 is in the way. And as usual, you can't capture your own pieces. The white rook can't get to C7 or C8 or to any of the squares to the right of the pawn on E3, because of course rooks can't jump things. So the white rook can go to any of the squares with the dot. But of course the white rook could capture the pawn on C6. It just wouldn't be very good because the black rook would immediately take him back. And so we can just see the arrows there indicating the moves. Okay. And so, yeah, we don't want to be taking the pawn on C6 because the black rook will just recapture straight away with the blue line. So really, really simple. That's probably the easiest piece to understand the moves of the rook, which is why we can do this so quickly. So pawn wars again, 8 pawns aside, rooks on their original square, and you know the rules by now. Who can get a pawn across the board or capture all the enemy pieces? See if you can mix things up a bit after you've got the hang of it. So you might play rook and bishop against rook and knight, or an interesting one to do would be 2 rooks against 2 bishops and a knight. And that's an interesting mix to see who would come off best there. So enjoy your chess, see who wins. Good luck.